There are crime scenes that make seasoned detectives quit their jobs. This is one of them. In 25 years of investigating homicides, Detective Samuel Ortiz had witnessed humanity at its absolute worst. He had seen drug deals gone wrong, domestic violence escalated beyond recognition, and random acts of brutality that defied explanation. But nothing in his extensive career had prepared him for what he would discover on that cold Tuesday morning in a quiet rural community. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt that something was terribly wrong? That gut instinct that tells you to turn around and leave, even when everything looks normal on the surface. Have you ever trusted your neighbors so completely that you would never lock your doors at night? In small communities across America, this level of trust is not just common, it is essential to the fabric of daily life. But what happens when that trust is shattered in the most horrific way possible? When the very safety you have built your life around becomes an illusion? When the people you thought you knew reveal themselves to be capable of unthinkable acts? Have you ever heard news so disturbing that it changed how you see the world forever? The kind of story that makes you question everything you believed about human nature. When first responders arrived at the Harrow family home that autumn morning, they expected to find a medical emergency, perhaps a heart attack, maybe a fall down the stairs. What they found instead would haunt them for the rest of their careers. Inside the modest family home, a scene of calculated brutality awaited them. This was not a crime of passion, not a robbery gone wrong, not a domestic dispute that escalated too quickly. This was something far more disturbing. The careful arrangement of the victims, the methodical nature of the violence, and the chilling attention to detail suggested a mind that had planned every single moment. Dr. Evelyn Brooks, the county coroner who had examined countless victims over her quarter-century career, would later describe the scene as the most disturbing she had ever encountered. It was not just the violence, she would say, her voice barely above a whisper. It was the precision, the deliberate nature of every wound, every placement, every detail. Someone had taken their time. But who could commit such an act in a community where everyone knows everyone? Who could look a loving family in the eye and then orchestrate their destruction with such cold calculation? And perhaps most terrifyingly, how could they simply vanish without leaving a single trace? The answers to these questions would consume an entire police department, traumatize seasoned investigators, and transform a peaceful community into a place where neighbors looked at each other with suspicion and fear. This case would challenge everything law enforcement thought they knew about criminal behavior, about motives, and about the capacity for evil that can hide behind a familiar face. If you are ready to explore one of the most disturbing unsolved cases in American true crime history, hit that like button right now, because what you are about to hear will challenge your assumptions about safety, about trust, and about the darkness that can exist in the most unexpected places. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications turned on, because cases like this remind us that the most dangerous predators are often the ones we never see coming. In the heart of rural America, nestled between rolling farmland and ancient oak trees, sat a community that embodied everything good about small-town life. This was the kind of place where children rode their bicycles without helmets, where front doors remained unlocked day and night, and where the biggest news of the week might be who won the annual pie baking contest at the county fair. The town square featured a classic red brick courthouse surrounded by family-owned businesses that had been passed down through generations. Henderson's hardware store, Miller's Five and Dime, and Thompson's Diner formed the commercial heart of a community where handshake deals still meant something, and your word was your bond. Church bells rang every Sunday morning, calling families to services where 3 generations might sit in the same pew their great-grandparents had occupied decades earlier. In this idyllic setting, the Harrow family had built a life that seemed lifted straight from a Norman Rockwell painting. Victor Harrow represented everything the community valued in a man. At 32 years old, he had worked at Henderson's Hardware for over a decade, earning a reputation for reliability that bordered on legendary. When Victor told you he would deliver lumber on Tuesday, you could set your watch by his arrival. His calloused hands spoke of honest work, and his gentle manner with customers made him a favorite among the elderly residents who appreciated his patience with their questions and concerns. Victor never met a problem he could not solve, recalled Martha Henderson, whose family owned the hardware store. Customers would come in with the most complicated projects, and Victor would spend 20 minutes drawing diagrams and explaining every step. He treated every person like family. His dedication extended beyond his job. Victor served as a volunteer firefighter, responding to calls at all hours without complaint. He organized the annual Christmas toy drive and spent countless weekends helping neighbors with home repairs, refusing payment for his time and expertise. Lila Harrow complemented her husband perfectly. At 29, she possessed the rare gift of making everyone feel welcomed and valued. As the coordinator for the community food bank, Lila knew every family's struggles and celebrated their victories. She organized meal trains for new mothers, visited shut-ins with homemade soup, and somehow managed to remember every birthday and anniversary in town. Lila had this way of showing up exactly when you needed her most, remembered Janet Collins, her closest friend and neighbor. When my mother was dying of cancer, Lila appeared at my door every morning with coffee and homemade muffins. She never asked what she could do to help, she just helped. Lila's garden produced enough vegetables to supply half the neighborhood, and she spent summer evenings teaching children how to plant seeds and tend to growing plants. Her canning and preserving skills were legendary, and her jars of jam and pickles were coveted prizes at the church auction. Their son Mason, 3 years old with bright blue eyes and an infectious laugh, had become the unofficial mascot of downtown. He accompanied his father to work on Saturdays, charming customers with his curiosity and enthusiasm. Mason possessed an unusual ability to remember everyone's name and would greet adults with formal politeness that delighted the entire community. "That little boy could make you smile on your worst day," said Tom Martinez, who ran the local barbershop. "He would march into my shop, shake my hand like a grown man, and ask about my wife's arthritis. 3 years old, and he cared more about people than most adults." Mason spent his afternoons exploring the neighborhood with his faithful golden retriever, building elaborate block cities in the living room, and helping his mother tend to her garden. His favorite activity involved visiting the fire station, where his father's colleagues let him sit in the truck and sound the sirens. Baby Grace, only 8 months old, had arrived the previous winter to tremendous community excitement. Her christening at St. Mary's Church had drawn nearly every resident, and her sweet temperament made her a favorite at every gathering. Grace had just begun sitting up on her own and delighted everyone with her bright smile and curious nature. The Harrow family's daily routine reflected their deep community connections. Morning coffee at Thompson's Diner, afternoon visits with neighbors, evening walks through tree-lined streets where they knew every family by name. They attended every community event, from high school football games to church potlucks, always arriving with something homemade to share. Their dreams were simple but profound, watching their children grow up surrounded by love and community, eventually expanding their family, and continuing to serve their neighbors with the same dedication their own parents had shown. Nobody could have predicted that this foundation of love, trust, and community would soon become the setting for an act of violence so brutal that it would shatter everything they held dear. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn chill that made breath visible in small puffs of vapor. At Henderson's hardware store, the opening routine proceeded exactly as it had every weekday for the past decade. Martha Henderson unlocked the front door at 7 o'clock sharp, turned on the lights, and started the coffee maker that would fuel her small team through another busy day. By 7:30, concern began to creep into the morning routine. Victor Harrow had never missed a day of work without calling ahead. His reliability was legendary among staff and customers alike. When the clock struck 8 o'clock, and Victor still had not arrived, Martha found herself glancing toward the door every few minutes. "Maybe he overslept," suggested Danny Morrison, the part-time stock clerk who had worked alongside Victor for 3 years. "Even Victor deserves a sleep-in day." But as the morning wore on, that explanation felt increasingly hollow. At 9:15, Martha called the Harrow house. The phone rang 6 times before going to the answering machine. She left a brief message asking Victor to call the store when he got the chance. By 10 o'clock, the first customers began asking where Victor was. Mr. Jenkins needed help loading fence posts into his truck, and Mrs. Patterson wanted advice about winterizing her garden shed. These were the kinds of requests that Victor handled with ease, and his absence left noticeable gaps in the store's operations. Martha called the house again at 11 o'clock. Again, no answer. She tried once more at noon, then decided to contact Victor's father. Robert Harrow, 71 years old and still sharp as a tack, lived just 15 minutes away from his son's family. When Martha explained the situation, a cold knot of worry formed in his stomach. Victor called his father every Sunday evening without fail, and their last conversation had revealed nothing unusual. The family was healthy, happy, and looking forward to Halloween just 2 weeks away. "I will drive over and check on them," Robert told Martha, his voice steady despite the growing anxiety he felt. The drive to his son's house normally took 12 minutes, but today it felt like an hour. Robert's mind raced through possibilities. Perhaps the whole family had come down with flu. Maybe little Grace was sick and they had rushed to the hospital. There had to be a simple explanation. The Harrow house sat on Elm Street, a quiet residential road lined with mature trees, whose leaves had turned brilliant shades of orange and gold. The modest two-story home featured white siding, blue shutters, and a wraparound porch where Victor had installed a swing the previous spring. Lila's flower garden, now dormant for winter, showed signs of recent care and attention. Robert pulled into the driveway and immediately noticed Victor's truck parked in its usual spot. Relief flooded through him momentarily. If the truck was here, the family was home. But as he approached the front door, details began to register that made his relief evaporate. The morning newspaper lay undisturbed on the porch steps. Victor always brought the paper inside while drinking his first cup of coffee. The porch light was still on, though sunrise had occurred hours earlier. Most unsettling of all, the front door stood slightly ajar, maybe 3 inches open to the cool morning air. Robert knocked firmly and called out, "Victor, Lila, it is Dad." No response came from inside the house. He pushed the door open wider and stepped into the entryway, calling again. The silence that greeted him felt wrong in a way he could not articulate. You can see this scene unfolding. An elderly man entering what should be a warm family home, expecting to hear the sounds of daily life. Instead, an oppressive quiet filled every room. No television playing children's programs, no radio providing background music, no conversation between husband and wife planning their day. Robert moved through the living room and immediately understood that something terrible had happened. Lila lay motionless on the carpet near the sofa, her body positioned in a way that suggested careful placement rather than a natural fall. Her eyes were closed, and her hands were folded across her chest as if she were sleeping peacefully. But the unnatural stillness and the strange positioning made it clear that this was no ordinary rest. Baby Grace was nearby, wrapped in her favorite yellow blanket, and lying in what appeared to be a makeshift bed created from couch cushions. The infant's peaceful expression contradicted the growing horror of the scene. Robert's training as a former volunteer paramedic kicked in, and he checked for vital signs while calling for his grandson. "Mason, where are you, buddy?" His voice echoed through the house as he made his way toward the bedrooms. In the back bedroom, he found 3-year-old Mason lying on his small bed, dressed in his favorite dinosaur pajamas. Like his mother and sister, the boy appeared to be sleeping, but the same unnatural stillness pervaded the scene. The careful arrangement of all 3 victims suggested a mind that had taken time to stage the scene with deliberate precision. This was not the chaotic aftermath of violence, but something far more disturbing, a methodical presentation that implied planning, control, and a chilling attention to detail. Robert's hands shook as he dialed 911, his voice barely functioning as he tried to explain what he had discovered. Have you ever felt completely safe in your own community, only to have that safety shattered by news that changed everything? Share in the comments below. What would you do if you discovered that the people you trusted most might not be who they seem? Hit that subscribe button if you want to understand how quickly paradise can become a nightmare. Within 20 minutes of Robert Harrow's frantic 911 call, the quiet street filled with emergency vehicles, Detective Samuel Ortiz arrived at the scene with the weight of 18 years of homicide investigation experience behind him. At 45, he had earned a reputation throughout the county for his methodical approach to crime scenes and his ability to remain calm under the most disturbing circumstances. Ortiz had worked cases involving gang violence in the city, domestic murders that shocked suburban communities, and even a series of armed robberies that had terrorized local businesses. But as he stepped through the front door of the Harrow home, something about the scene immediately set his investigative instincts on high alert. "This is not what it appears to be," he murmured to his partner, Detective Lisa Chen, who was documenting their initial observations. The positioning of the victims, the absence of any visible blood spatter, and the almost peaceful nature of the scene contradicted everything Ortiz knew about violent crime. The forensic examination began with the living room, where Lila Harrow lay in what could only be described as a deliberately arranged position. Her body showed no signs of defensive wounds, no torn clothing, no indication that she had fought for her life. The lack of blood evidence suggested that whatever had caused her death had not involved obvious trauma to major arteries or organs. Dr. Evelyn Brooks arrived 30 minutes later, her 25 years of experience as county coroner having prepared her for the most challenging cases. But as she began her preliminary examination of Lila's body, her professional composure began to crack. "I have never encountered positioning like this," Dr. Brooks told Detective Ortiz quietly. "Look at her hands. They have been folded deliberately across her chest. Her hair has been brushed and arranged. Someone spent significant time with this victim after death occurred." The examination of baby Grace revealed equally disturbing details. The infant had been wrapped in her blanket with care that bordered on tenderness, placed on a makeshift bed created from sofa cushions. The yellow blanket was tucked around her tiny body with the precision of a loving parent putting a child down for a nap. "Whoever did this wanted them to look peaceful," Dr. Brooks observed, her voice barely above a whisper. "This level of post-mortem care requires extensive time and suggests a perpetrator who was not rushed or concerned about discovery." In Mason's bedroom, the 3-year-old lay in his dinosaur pajamas, positioned on his bed, as if he had simply fallen asleep. His favorite stuffed animal, a brown teddy bear named Buttons, had been placed carefully in his arms. The attention to these details suggested someone who either knew the family's routines intimately or had spent considerable time in the house observing their habits. Detective Ortiz noted the complete absence of signs of forced entry. No broken windows, no damaged door frames, no picked locks. The implications were chilling. The Harrow family had willingly allowed their killer into their home. This meant they either knew their attacker personally or had been deceived by someone who appeared trustworthy. As the crime scene investigation continued, one glaring absence became increasingly obvious. Victor Harrow was nowhere to be found. His truck sat in the driveway, his work clothes hung in the bedroom closet, and his wallet lay on the kitchen counter. But Victor himself had vanished completely. The search for the missing father began immediately. Deputies canvassed the neighborhood, checked local hospitals, and contacted every business where Victor might have gone. Hours passed with no trace of him, and Detective Ortiz began to fear that Victor's fate would prove even more disturbing than what they had already discovered. At 4:30 that afternoon, the search expanded to rural areas surrounding the community. Deputy Marshal Reynolds was checking a remote field approximately 3 miles from the Harrow home when he spotted something that made his blood run cold. Partially concealed by tall grass and fallen leaves, Victor Harrow's body lay in a clearing surrounded by old oak trees. Unlike his family, Victor bore the unmistakable evidence of extreme violence. Multiple gunshot wounds to his torso and head indicated that he had been executed with methodical precision. But the gunshots were only the beginning of the horror. Post-mortem examination would reveal that Victor had been subjected to deliberate mutilation that spoke to a level of rage and control that defied rational explanation. Dr. Brooks's examination of Victor's remains revealed knife wounds that appeared to have been inflicted after death, suggesting that the killer had spent time with the body in that remote location. The pattern of injuries indicated someone with knowledge of human anatomy, possibly medical or military training. The person who did this understood exactly how to inflict maximum damage, Dr. Brooks explained to Detective Ortiz. These are not random stab wounds. They follow specific anatomical pathways that suggest training or extensive preparation. The stark difference between the treatment of Victor's body and the careful arrangement of his family members suggested a killer operating with 2 distinct emotional states. The family had been killed and positioned with what could almost be described as reverence, while Victor had been brutalized with unbridled fury. But the evidence would reveal something even more chilling than the murders themselves. Trace amounts of a rare chemical compound found at both crime scenes that would lead investigators down a path they never could have anticipated. This compound, typically used in professional medical procedures, suggested that their killer possessed access to specialized equipment and knowledge that narrowed the suspect pool considerably. The investigation was about to take a turn that would challenge everything law enforcement thought they knew about the capabilities and motivations of the person who had destroyed the Harrow family. Detective Ortiz approached the Harrow case with the systematic precision that had made him successful throughout his career. He established a command center at the local police station and began building a comprehensive timeline of the family's final 24 hours. Every phone call, every visitor, every routine activity would be documented and analyzed for potential leads. The door-to-door interviews began the morning after the discovery. Detective Ortiz and his team spoke with every resident within a 6-block radius of the Harrow home, searching for any unusual activity or unfamiliar faces in the days leading up to the murders. Margaret Sullivan, who lived directly across the street, provided the first significant lead. "I saw a red sedan parked down the block on Monday evening," she told Detective Chen. "It was not a car I recognized, and in this neighborhood, you know every vehicle that belongs here. The driver was sitting inside for at least 20 minutes, but I could not see their face clearly. This red sedan became the focus of an intensive investigation. Detective Ortiz contacted the Department of Motor Vehicles to obtain registration records for every red sedan in the county. His team spent 3 weeks tracking down and interviewing the owners of 47 vehicles that matched the general description. Each interview followed the same pattern. Alibis were verified, whereabouts were confirmed, and potential connections to the Harrow family were explored. One by one, every lead dissolved into dead ends. The mysterious red sedan remained as elusive as its driver. The forensic analysis of the crime scenes revealed evidence that should have provided breakthrough leads but instead deepened the mystery. The chemical residue found at both locations was identified as chloral hydrate, a sedative compound typically used in medical procedures. This discovery suggested that the victims had been incapacitated before their deaths, explaining the lack of defensive wounds and signs of struggle. However, chloral hydrate was not readily available to the general public. Detective Ortiz obtained warrants to investigate local hospitals, veterinary clinics, and research facilities that might have access to the compound. The investigation expanded to include interviews with medical professionals, laboratory technicians, and anyone with legitimate access to controlled substances. The latent fingerprint analysis proved equally frustrating. Crime scene technicians recovered partial prints from various surfaces in the Harrow home, but none matched any individual in local, state, or federal databases. Either the killer had no prior criminal record, or they had taken extraordinary precautions to avoid leaving identifiable evidence. Recognizing that conventional investigative methods were proving inadequate, Detective Ortiz requested assistance from the Federal Bureau of Investigation's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Agent Patricia Morrison, a criminal profiler with extensive experience in complex homicide cases, arrived to analyze the behavioral evidence left behind by the killer. Agent Morrison's initial assessment was deeply unsettling. "This is not a typical family annihilation," she explained to the investigator. "Most family killers are driven by rage, desperation, or mental breakdown. They strike quickly and leave chaotic crime scenes. This perpetrator demonstrated control, planning, and what can only be described as ritualistic behavior." The profiler identified several key characteristics that distinguished this case from standard domestic violence scenarios. The post-mortem care given to Lila, Mason, and baby Grace suggested someone who viewed these victims differently than Victor. The careful positioning, the attention to comfort details like blankets and stuffed animals, indicated a perpetrator who may have convinced themselves they were providing mercy or peace. "The killer likely knew this family personally," Agent Morrison continued. "The level of intimate detail in the staging suggests familiarity with the victim's routines, preferences, and emotional attachments. This was not a stranger killing." Victor's brutal treatment presented a stark contrast that revealed the killer's true emotional state. The execution-style gunshots, followed by extensive mutilation, indicated personal rage directed specifically at the family patriarch. This suggested that Victor may have been the primary target, with his family becoming secondary victims to eliminate witnesses or complete a psychological fantasy. The ritualistic elements extended beyond the positioning of bodies. Crime scene analysis revealed that certain household items had been moved and rearranged in patterns that served no practical purpose. Family photographs had been turned face down, religious items had been repositioned, and personal belongings had been sorted and organized in ways that held meaning only to the perpetrator. Agent Morrison's profile described a killer who was organized, intelligent, and capable of maintaining a normal facade in daily interactions. "This person is likely well regarded in their community," she warned. "They have successfully hidden their violent tendencies behind a mask of respectability. They may even be someone who has offered assistance or comfort to the community during this investigation." The investigation had revealed a chilling truth. They were hunting someone who walked among them, someone who appeared normal while harboring the capacity for methodical brutality that defied comprehension. As the investigation entered its second week, Detective Ortiz and his team developed multiple theories about who could have committed such a calculated crime. Each potential explanation seemed to offer hope for a breakthrough, but the evidence consistently led to frustration and dead ends. The drifter theory emerged early in the investigation when several residents reported seeing an unfamiliar man walking through the neighborhood in the days before the murders. Witnesses described him as approximately 40 years old, wearing worn clothing and carrying a large backpack. Margaret Sullivan, the neighbor who had spotted the red sedan, also claimed to have seen this individual near the town square on Sunday afternoon. Detective Ortiz assigned 2 officers to track down this mysterious figure. They checked local homeless shelters, interviewed staff at nearby truck stops, and contacted police departments in surrounding counties. The search intensified when they learned that a man matching the description had been asking for work at several farms outside of town. After 5 days of intensive searching, they located their suspect at a campsite 15 miles away. James Mitchell, a 42-year-old unemployed construction worker, had been traveling through the area looking for seasonal work. However, his alibi proved rock solid. During the time frame of the murders, Mitchell had been in the county jail, serving a 72-hour sentence for public intoxication. The investigation then shifted focus to Victor's workplace and daily routine. Detective Ortiz reasoned that someone with access to the family's schedule could have planned the attack for a time when Victor would be away from home, making his wife and children vulnerable. Henderson's hardware store became a focal point of scrutiny. Detective Chen interviewed every employee, regular customer, and delivery driver who might have known Victor's work schedule. She discovered that Victor's routine was remarkably predictable. He arrived at 7:30 every morning, took lunch at noon, and left at 5 o'clock sharp. However, this schedule was common knowledge throughout the community. Victor's reliability meant that dozens of people could predict his whereabouts at any given time. The list of potential suspects expanded rather than narrowed, encompassing virtually everyone who had ever interacted with the family. The insider knowledge theory gained momentum when investigators analyzed the specific details of the crime scene staging. Someone had known that baby Grace preferred her yellow blanket, that Mason slept with his teddy bear named Buttons, and that Lila kept emergency medical supplies in the kitchen cabinet. This level of intimate familiarity suggested either a close friend or someone who had spent considerable time observing the family. Detective Ortiz created a list of everyone with regular access to the Harrow home: babysitters, repair workers, church members who visited regularly, and extended family members. Each person was interviewed extensively, their whereabouts verified, and their relationships with the family examined for any signs of tension or unusual behavior. The timing of the attack presented another crucial puzzle. Why had the killer chosen that specific Tuesday morning? Detective Ortiz analyzed Victor's work schedule, family appointments, and community events for any patterns that might explain the selection of that date. A disturbing discovery emerged when investigators attempted to account for Victor's final hours. According to his father, Victor had planned to arrive at work early on Tuesday to help unload a lumber delivery. However, the delivery had been rescheduled to Wednesday at the last minute. This meant Victor should have followed his normal routine and arrived at 7:30, not earlier. The gap between Victor's expected departure time and when his absence was noticed at work suggested he had been intercepted or detained somewhere between his home and the hardware store. This missing time period became crucial to understanding how the killer had gained control of the situation. Detective Ortiz ordered a comprehensive review of local criminal history, searching for any individual with the skills and psychological profile to commit such a methodical crime. The search expanded to include military personnel with combat experience, medical professionals with access to controlled substances, and anyone with a history of violence against families. Simultaneously, federal agents researched similar cases nationwide, looking for patterns that might indicate a serial killer operating across multiple jurisdictions. They found isolated cases with some similarities, but none that matched the specific ritualistic elements present in the Harrow murders. Each theory seemed promising, until closer examination revealed fatal flaws in logic or evidence. The investigation team found themselves chasing shadows, pursuing leads that dissolved upon scrutiny, and facing the unsettling possibility that their perpetrator had committed the perfect crime. What is your theory about who could have committed such a calculated attack? Do you think this was someone the family knew personally, or could a stranger have learned enough about their routines to plan such a methodical crime? Share your thoughts in the comments below and make sure you are subscribed, because this case is about to take an even more disturbing turn. The Harrow case extracted a devastating toll on everyone who worked to solve it, leaving psychological scars that would never fully heal. For seasoned professionals who had dedicated their careers to seeking justice, this investigation challenged their fundamental beliefs about human nature and their ability to protect innocent families. Detective Samuel Ortiz began experiencing insomnia within the first week of the investigation. The carefully arranged crime scene haunted his dreams, replacing peaceful sleep with vivid nightmares of that Tuesday morning discovery. "I would close my eyes and see baby Grace wrapped in that yellow blanket," Ortiz later confided to a police counselor. "I could not stop thinking about how someone could look at an 8-month-old child and decide to end her life." The detective's wife, Maria, watched helplessly as her husband withdrew from family dinners and holiday celebrations. Ortiz found himself checking and rechecking the locks on their doors each night, installing additional security lights around their home. and struggling to enjoy moments with his own young children without thinking about the Harrow family's final hours. Samuel aged 10 years in the first month of that case. Maria recalled years later. He stopped laughing at his children's jokes. He stopped trusting that good things could last. The case changed who he was as a person, not just as a detective. Dr. Evelyn Brooks faced her own crisis of professional confidence. In 25 years of examining victims, she had developed coping mechanisms that allowed her to maintain emotional distance from her work. The Harrow case shattered those defenses completely. "I had examined hundreds of bodies," Dr. Brooks explained during a rare interview about the case. "Car accident victims, drowning cases, heart attack patients, even homicide victims from domestic violence situations. But I had never encountered post-mortem care that mimicked parental love. Someone had brushed Lila's hair after death. They had positioned Mason's hands around his teddy bear with tenderness. The juxtaposition of violence and care was more disturbing than pure brutality." Dr. Brooks began questioning her ability to remain objective in future cases. She took a 6-month leave of absence and considered early retirement before ultimately returning to work with a fundamentally changed perspective on the nature of evil. Detective Lisa Chen, Ortiz's partner, developed severe anxiety that manifested in panic attacks during routine investigations. The methodical nature of the Harrow crime scene made her hyper-vigilant about details that other investigators might dismiss as coincidental. "Every case became connected to the Harrow murders in my mind," Chen explained. "If I saw family photographs turned face down at a burglary scene, I immediately suspected ritualistic behavior. If victims were positioned in any way that seemed deliberate, I assumed we were dealing with another calculated killer. The case made me see patterns that were not there." The first responders who discovered the scene struggled with their own trauma. Deputy Marshal Reynolds, who found Victor's body in the remote field, resigned from law enforcement 6 months later and moved to another state to escape the memories. "I kept thinking about how Victor must have known what was happening to his family," Reynolds said. "The killer had saved him for last, probably made him watch, or at least know that his wife and children were already dead. That level of psychological torture was beyond anything I could process." The case forced the department to implement new protocols for officer mental health support. Mandatory counseling sessions were established for investigators working on particularly disturbing cases, and rotation policies were created to prevent any single detective from becoming too emotionally invested in unsolved investigations. These changes came too late for the original team. The Harrow case became a watershed moment that revealed how pursuing justice for the most innocent victims could destroy the very people dedicated to protecting them. The haunting truth that emerged was not just about the killer's capacity for evil, but about the hidden cost of fighting that evil. Every photograph analyzed, every witness interviewed, every sleepless night spent reviewing evidence chipped away at the investigators' faith in human goodness. Their sacrifice in pursuing justice for the Harrow family would never be publicly recognized, but it represented the true price of standing between civilization and chaos. The brutal murders of the Harrow family created ripple effects that fundamentally altered the character of an entire community. What had once been a place defined by trust, openness, and neighborly connection became something unrecognizable to its longtime residents. Picture a town where children no longer played outside without constant supervision, where front doors remained locked for the first time in decades, and where familiar faces suddenly seemed capable of unspeakable acts. This transformation happened gradually, but its effects were profound and lasting. The Morrison family, who had lived 3 doors down from the Harrows for 8 years, packed their belongings and moved to another state within 6 weeks of the murders. Janet Morrison could not bear to walk past the empty Harrow house each day, and her 7-year-old daughter had begun having nightmares about monsters hiding in neighbors' homes. "We used to borrow sugar from each other, watch each other's children, leave our doors unlocked when we ran to the store," Janet explained to friends who questioned their sudden departure. "After what happened to Victor and Lila, I realized I did not actually know any of my neighbors at all. How could someone commit such an act in a place where everyone supposedly knew everyone?" The Henderson family, longtime residents with deep community roots, also made the difficult decision to relocate. Their teenage son had been friends with Victor Harrow and could not cope with the constant reminders of the tragedy. The family's departure represented a significant loss for the community, as Mr. Henderson had served on the town council for 12 years. Community events that had once brought residents together began to feel forced and artificial. The annual Harvest Festival, traditionally held in October, was cancelled that year, out of respect for the grieving community. When it resumed the following year, attendance had dropped by more than half. Church services, once filled with familiar faces and comfortable conversations, became subdued gatherings where people studied each other with new suspicion. Pastor Williams noticed that congregation members who had sat together for years began spreading out across the sanctuary, no longer comfortable with the close proximity that had once defined their fellowship. Elderly resident Thomas Mackenzie, who had lived in the community for 73 years, became the unofficial keeper of its transformed memory. "I remember when we used to have block parties every summer," he reflected sadly. "Children would run from house to house, and parents would not worry about where they were or who they were with. We had potluck dinners where everyone brought something homemade, and nobody thought twice about eating food prepared in someone else's kitchen." Mackenzie observed changes in behavior that highlighted the community's loss of innocence. Now people check references before hiring a babysitter from a family they have known for generations. We have security systems on houses that never even had deadbolts. The spontaneous visits between neighbors have stopped completely. Children's behavior reflected the adults' anxiety in heartbreaking ways. Teachers at the local elementary school reported increased incidents of separation anxiety, with students reluctant to leave their parents at drop-off time. Code playground conversations among 8- and 9-year-olds included discussions about stranger danger and safety protocols that previous generations had never needed to consider. Local businesses felt the economic impact as tourism and outside visitors decreased dramatically. Thompson's Diner, once a popular stop for travelers passing through, saw revenue drop by 30% as word of the unsolved murders spread to surrounding communities. Henderson's hardware store, where Victor had worked, struggled to maintain customers who felt uncomfortable returning to a place so closely associated with the tragedy. The transformation extended to social dynamics that had once seemed permanent. Neighbors who had borrowed tools and shared garden produce for decades began maintaining more formal boundaries. Spontaneous visits were replaced by scheduled appointments, and casual conversations over backyard fences became rare occurrences. What emerged was not just a community dealing with grief, but a place fundamentally altered by the realization that evil could hide behind the most trusted faces, striking without warning in the most unlikely places. As months turned into years, the Harrow case evolved from an active investigation into a cold case that consumed multiple generations of law enforcement officers. The file grew thicker with each passing year, filled with reports, witness statements, and forensic analyses that seemed to circle endlessly without reaching a conclusion. The introduction of DNA analysis technology in the early 1990s brought renewed hope to the investigation. Detective Ortiz partnered with state forensic laboratories to re-examine every piece of physical evidence collected from both crime scenes. Hair samples, fabric fibers, and trace evidence that had been preserved but not fully analyzed were subjected to sophisticated testing procedures that had not existed during the original investigation. The results proved both promising and frustrating. DNA profiles were successfully extracted from several samples, confirming the presence of an unknown individual at both the Harrow home and the remote field where Victor's body was discovered. However, when these profiles were compared against the rapidly expanding national DNA database, no matches were found. "We had definitive proof that our suspect had left biological evidence," Detective Ortiz explained to the cold case team. "But that evidence pointed to someone who had never been arrested, never served in the military, and never provided DNA samples for any legal proceeding. We were looking for a ghost." Enhanced forensic analysis of the mysterious chemical residue yielded similarly disappointing results. Advanced mass spectrometry confirmed the presence of chloral hydrate, but provided no additional clues about its source or the method by which the perpetrator had obtained it. Investigators contacted pharmaceutical companies, research institutions, and veterinary suppliers across 3 states, but the trail remained cold. The case received significant media attention on its 5th anniversary, when a true crime television program featured the murders in a Wana Wang documentary. The broadcast generated over 200 tips from viewers across the country, each requiring investigation and follow-up. Detective Chen, who had taken primary responsibility for the case after Ortiz's promotion to sergeant, spent 6 months pursuing these leads. A woman in California claimed her ex-husband had confessed to the murders during their divorce proceedings. A man in Texas reported seeing someone matching the suspect's description near his ranch. A retired nurse from a neighboring state suggested that the chemical evidence pointed to someone with access to hospital supplies. Each tip demanded careful investigation, witness interviews, and verification of alibis. Each investigation ended with the same result: another dead end, another false hope, another reminder that their perpetrator remained beyond reach. The 10th anniversary of the murders brought a formal reinvestigation led by a specially assigned cold case team. Detective Maria Santos, a specialist in unsolved homicides, reviewed every piece of evidence with fresh eyes and new technological resources. Advanced computer modeling allowed investigators to create three-dimensional reconstructions of both crime scenes, searching for overlooked details or patterns that might have escaped earlier notice. Psychological profiling techniques had evolved significantly, and new analysts examined the behavioral evidence with updated understanding of criminal psychology. The reinvestigation expanded beyond the original geographic boundaries, exploring the possibility that the perpetrator had committed similar crimes in other jurisdictions. Santos coordinated with law enforcement agencies across 12 states, comparing the Harrow case with unsolved murders that shared similar characteristics. Detective Ortiz, now approaching retirement age, participated in the anniversary review despite the personal toll the case had exacted on his career and family life. The investigation had defined his professional legacy in ways he had never anticipated, becoming the case that proved even the most dedicated investigators could be defeated by criminal cunning. "I have worked hundreds of cases over my career," Ortiz reflected during a recorded interview for the case file. "I have solved murders that seemed impossible, found killers who thought they were untouchable, and brought closure to families who had given up hope. But this case has beaten me. After 20 years, I still wake up thinking about those children, about what Victor must have endured, about a killer who walks free." The transition to new investigators brought both hope and frustration. Detective Santos and her team approached the evidence with enthusiasm and modern techniques, but they soon encountered the same obstacles that had stymied their predecessors. The case seemed to exist in a persistent state of being almost solved, with evidence pointing toward conclusions that remained just beyond reach. Just when hope seemed lost, a breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source that would reignite the investigation and provide the first real progress in over a decade. A discovery that would challenge everything investigators thought they knew about the Harrow murders and open entirely new avenues of pursuit. Today, more than 2 decades after that horrific Tuesday morning, the Harrow family home stands as a silent monument to lives cut tragically short. The white siding has faded to grey, the blue shutters hang askew, and Lila's once vibrant garden has surrendered to weeds and neglect. No family has ever moved into the house, and local real estate agents have quietly removed it from their listings. The community has worked to honor the Harrow family's memory through meaningful tributes. A small memorial garden was established in the town square, featuring 4 granite stones inscribed with the names Victor, Lila, Mason, and Grace. Local residents maintain the garden year-round, planting flowers that bloom in the seasons the family will never see. St. Mary's Church dedicated a stained glass window to the family, depicting a shepherd protecting his flock. The annual scholarship fund established in their name has helped 37 local students pursue higher education, ensuring that the Harrow legacy includes hope for future generations. The case offers profound lessons about recognizing potential threats without succumbing to paralyzing fear. Criminal justice experts emphasize the importance of trusting instincts when something feels wrong, maintaining healthy skepticism about unfamiliar individuals, and understanding that evil can present itself in deceptively normal forms. Dr. Brooks, now retired, reflects on how the case changed her understanding of human nature. 25 years of examining victims taught me that violence often erupts from passion, desperation, or mental illness, she explained in her final interview. The Harrow case revealed that some individuals can plan and execute brutality with cold calculation while maintaining appearances of normalcy. That knowledge changed how I view everyone I meet. Detective Ortiz, in his retirement speech, offered wisdom gained through decades of pursuing justice. "This case taught me that some mysteries may never be solved, but that does not diminish the importance of the search. Every interview conducted, every piece of evidence analyzed, every sleepless night spent reviewing files represents our commitment to the innocent victims who cannot speak for themselves." The investigation highlighted the crucial role that community support plays in law enforcement effectiveness. Residents who provided information, businesses that cooperated with searches, and families who endured repeated interviews all contributed to the pursuit of justice, even when that pursuit proved unsuccessful. The reality of unsolved cases forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the limitations of justice systems and the persistence of evil in human society. The Harrow murders remind us that not every story has a satisfying conclusion, not every villain faces consequences, and not every family receives the closure they deserve. Yet the community's response to tragedy demonstrates the resilience of human compassion. Neighbors who support each other through crisis, investigators who refuse to abandon difficult cases, and ordinary citizens who choose to honor victims through service and remembrance represent the enduring power of good in the face of inexplicable evil. The Harrow family's story continues to resonate because it forces us to examine our own assumptions about safety, trust, and the capacity for both cruelty and kindness that exists within human nature. What disturbing unsolved case has haunted your community? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and tell us what lessons you think we should learn from cases like this. If you want to explore more unsolved mysteries that changed entire communities, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Next week, we will examine another case where a single act of violence transformed an entire town forever. Until then, stay vigilant, stay safe, and remember that the search for truth never truly ends.